What up, guys? So today we got a question from Bartek in the UK who sends me a message asking about when is the right time to use Jiu-Jitsu Instructionals. So he says, Chewy, I've been training for about a year now, and I'm wondering if I should venture into the world of instructionals and seminars. My question is there a certain point or a belt level I should achieve before I begin expanding my knowledge and looking at seminars and instructionals and that sort of thing? I currently have my eyes set on your butterfly instructional, your butterfly effect instructional, and P.S. Hi from the UK. So, brother, thank you. Thanks for your message, and hi back from across the pond. So, here's sort of the way that I'm going to preface this whole video. I'm going to draw analogies to reading books because I think books can be one of those things that can be life-changing. You can learn so much from them, or you can literally get nothing from them. And I think instructionals are the exact same way. You can get a lot from them. You can literally change your game around. You can learn so much from them. Seminars the same way, but you can also get absolutely nothing from them. And it depends on how you use them. Now, you asked when is the right time. For me, I think if you're doing jiu-jitsu, it's the right time. It's like if you're literate. If you're literate and you can read, it's a good idea to start reading some books. You have to adjust those, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you're in jiu-jitsu, whether you're new or super advanced, it's a good idea to invest in instructionals depending on what you're trying to do. So what I'm going to do in this video is not tell you when the right time is, because it's now. Go and start. I've been using instructionals since I was a white belt. I've got a lot from them. But what I'm going to do in this video is tell you how to get the most from them, because I think that's a better question to ask. If you're going to invest the time and the money that you've put into this thing, you want to get the most from it, right? And so I'm going to give you some analogies that'll help you become better at extracting the knowledge from the instructionals and bringing it to your game, and possibly even help you read books and get more from them. So let's jump into these ideas. So the first thing that you want to do is consider, where are you at right now? So kind of going back to the book idea. If I have some guy that's getting ready to, complete his doctorate program in college or something, I'm not going to hand him Cat in the Hat. Likewise, I'm not going to go to a 5-year-old and hand him like one of Nietzsche's books, right? Probably not the best fit for either of them, right? Likewise, you need to think about your jiu-jitsu and where you're at, right? You need to think about that. So if you're investing into an instructional, you should think about, like, where am I at in my game? What kind of positions am I getting to? Where do I find myself pretty often? Because that can give you a good place to start with as far as like which instructionals should you invest into. So going back to, you were interested in my butterfly guard series. Okay, great. Then that means that you want to have at least get into that butterfly guard a little bit. So if you get into butterfly guard or open guard at some point, or even seated guard, then, it's a good idea to invest in that, right? On the flip side, if you never get to butterfly guard, if you're never there, then it's probably not a good idea. And like even for a brand new white belt, if you're a brand new white belt getting smashed and just mauled all over the mat, well then, a good instructional could be something on escaping side control or whatever. But I say this because you want to be careful about like drifting off into whatever cool position looks really interesting right now. And you want to think about where you're at right now. And that should be the focus of your instructional, at least in the beginning, and you can always build from there. The second thing that I would do is think about what excites you. Going back to reading for a second, I know so many people who say, I'm just not a reader. I don't like reading, right? But it's not true. I see people read all kinds of crap on the internet that kind of gets them excited. You just haven't found a book that interests you. Now, there is something to be said sometimes about reading a challenging book, a book that really stretches you mentally. That's a different story, because you can still be interested and it can be a difficult book. But at the same time, anybody can read. If you can read and you're competent enough to read, you can read a book all the way through. You just have to find something you're interested in. And a lot of times that's one of the first starts to becoming a reader. Well, likewise with instructionals, if you're going to go through the arduous process of taking information and breaking it down and learning it into your body, right? Because literally that's what you're doing. You're taking these ideas from people and you're like absorbing them into your body through practice. Well, that's not an easy task. That's difficult. And if you're going to do that, you have to be enthusiastic about it. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of his quotes that I have pinned up on my board over here, is that nothing great happens without enthusiasm. Actually, I think he worded it a little differently. Let me look it up real quick. He says, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm, right? And I think that's true. A lot of times people think that they lack discipline to do something. It's like you probably just have the wrong task or the wrong goal in front of you, right? So make sure that as you're sort of looking around for instructionals, you're thinking about, well, where am I right now? Where do I get to right now? Or what could I build off of right now? And then you think about, okay, like what kind of excites me? Like what would I like to add into this game? Because this is kind of a choose your own adventure book. Where do you want to go with this whole thing? Maybe you want to add some more offense, some more submissions, guard passing, better defense, whatever it is. Pick something that excites you, because you're going to need that excitement when you start getting into actually implementing this stuff and you're going through the frustration of adding something new into your game. Now, number 3 is the most difficult for most people. You have to balance your consumption of information with your sort of digestion and consolidating of that information, right? So here's what I mean by this. When it comes to books, right, you can go through a book and you can literally just read through it, let your eyes go over the pages and take all this information in, and you can remember none of it, right? People do it all the time. Now, that's sometimes okay if you're reading like a fiction book and you're just kind of enjoying it and it's relaxing, but if it's a book you're trying to like extract some information in, you can't just read through it really fast and expect to remember anything. And when it comes to jiu-jitsu, it's the same way. You don't want to binge watch an instructional like it's a Netflix series. You're not going to get a lot from that. Jiu-jitsu instructionals are full of this procedural information and conceptual information, how-tos, the whys and the whats. And to take that information and to truly learn it, not to be able to regurgitate it, but I'm talking about learning it in your body and mentally being able to express these ideas and really know them, that requires a much more active process. And so my encouragement to you, Bartik, is if you find an instructional that you like and you're going through it, you find a part of the instructional, like, ooh, that looks good, I want to try that. You stop. Now, you could watch a little bit more if you want to, right? But again, what you're really focused now on is what you just watched, what you said, I think I want to add that into my game. That becomes the video of focus. You watch that video, you rewatch it, you take notes on it, you can even mind map it out so that you can understand the concepts kind of and have them in sort of a physical form. And then the most important part, you need to go to the gym and practice it. You need to go drill it. You need to try it during situational rolling, try it during open rolling, put it out there and actually do something with it, because what's going to happen is you're going to watch the instructional, you're going to go try it out, you're going to make all kinds of mistakes, and then you got to take that feedback and the evidence that you've gained from this, like, does this work? Does this not work? I don't quite understand this concept, and then you go back and you watch the same videos, the same part of that instructional again to sort of see what you missed, to look at what happened. And you do this process back and forth. I typically recommend at least 7 times. Now, again, this sounds like, oh man, this is going to take forever, right? But here's the deal. If you go through this instructional and you casually watch it, you're not going to get anything from it. It's literally wasted time. So, I mean, it's like, imagine that I'm reading the most life-changing book ever created, right? But I just read through it casually, quickly, boom, boom, boom. And I get the ego boost of like, I finished this whole book in like a day, ha! But then you get nothing from it. It's a waste of time. But if you said it doubled or tripled the amount of time that it took me to go through that instructional or whatever it is, but like my game was radically altered from it, that's a win, right? Again, this isn't a fast process and you shouldn't imagine it. Most people, when you get a good black belt who's developed an instructional, this is literally like decades of time that have been dedicated to this, maybe sometimes at least years, right? It's a long process. And so it's going to be a little bit longer for you. So don't try to binge watch it. You want to balance that, because we live in this world of information. It's like an information of a buffet, right? As you're on the buffet line of information and everything's out there, whatever you want. But your plate's only so big. So you have to be careful with what you fill it with, because it can only hold so much without pushing stuff out. And so again, once you go through your instructional and you find something you like, boom, all right, we now have consumed some information. Now we got to give ourselves time to digest it. And we digest it by doing active things with it. Like I said, mind maps, elaborating and taking notes, going to the gym and practicing it, drilling it, doing all those things, and then coming back and watching the instructional again, seeing what we missed, and then you kind of go back and forth. Now, this one will be hard for some of you guys, but I'm going to encourage you, Bartek, to make sure that when you're focusing on your jiu-jitsu, to make it a long-form content focused. Now, obviously, you said instructionals, like a long-form instructional, so that's a good thing, right? Because think about going back to books. A lot of people mistakenly think that they can't read or that they're not readers, but it's not that. Most people, what happens is they're so used to things like these gadgets right here with social media, right? And with social media, and you think things of a similar ilk, their whole sort of design is around stealing your attention from you, right? Basically sucking you into it and just keeping you scrolling, keeping you doing this thing for hours. That's the whole goal, right? They don't make money if you don't stick around. Now, not to say that it's not fun to use them and that you can't use them. I use them very structured, right? In very structured ways. But again, you have to be very careful because they're just there to steal your attention. And what happens is then there are activities like reading a book, watching an instructional, even focusing on your coach during class. those activities require you to give your attention to something. And giving your attention is like a muscle. Being able to do that for periods of time, that's a muscle. And a lot of times people aren't used to flexing it. And so what happens is a lot of times they will struggle with these things. And so with that said, I would encourage you anytime, and this is just for the future thinking, anytime you come across something, if it's like a quick like TikTok type video, short form, boom, 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 and you see it, if you want to learn that thing, go find a long form version of it and then like go find it, right? Just like we said, we're going to limit our consumption of information as we're digesting the stuff that we want to learn. That means that you kind of have to cut some of this other stuff out because it's going to start coming in there. And as one of my students said, like she has like 100 different reels saved in her Instagram that she never looks at, and it sort of gets her attention all over the place, right? When you're trying to focus on an instructional, you're trying to change your game, you're trying to be narrowly focused on this area for at least a few weeks at a time before we start darting around at something else. So again, long form content, and again, it will not only help you change your game more, but it also help you develop that muscle for being able to give your attention to something, because you don't want someone to be limited to like a minute or whatever it is now, right? They changed the times on it, but a minute or minute and a half or whatever it is to give you an informational or instruction. You want them to be able to take however long it needs to be to give you the information you need. So again, long form content over short form. And Bartek, my last tip to you to get the most from the instructionals is to ask yourself, what are you going to give up? And I ask this because I imagine you're just like the rest of us. Everybody seems pretty damn busy these days, right? Don't have a ton of free time. It seems like it. Maybe you do have a lot more free time. Maybe that's just me projecting. But if you're someone that is busy and you don't have a ton of time, before you start adding more stuff onto the plate, you really have to think about, again, going back to our plate analogy, you're on this buffet line. Okay, well, your plate's full. What are you going to remove? Because if you're going to study instructionals, it's going to require some consistency to it, because you're going to be going through this process of studying the instructional, going back to the gym and trying it, exploring it, drilling it, whatever, coming back and watching the instructional, trying it out, and you're going back and forth, and you're going to need at least a small amount of time every day, 15, 20 minutes. You could give more, you could give less, but again, some amount of time on a regular basis to do this. And so if for some reason, if you're like, man, I'm super busy, whatever, I would really be mindful about what you're going to give up in order to implement this. Because again, I say this anytime you're going to add something to the plate, we need to make room for it. And I think sometimes people get instructionals and they don't do anything with them. They sit in the sort of the proverbial digital bookshelf and they never take them out. And it's partly because they're already so damn busy, it's hard to get to. So you want to ask yourself, what kind of time are you going to square away? What is going to be your study time? I personally have a desk set up over on the side here in my office, where this is where, like, when I'm studying jiu-jitsu and any of my gym stuff, like any of that jiu-jitsu type stuff, that's where it happens. Now, you may not be able to give yourself a desk per se, but you could keep like your notebook out, so that every time you see that notebook, it's like, oh man, I should study. There it is. It's ready for me. Or you could, maybe have your instructional open at a certain time, like in your computer. You could say, okay, I'm going to study this first thing in the morning. I'm getting ready to go to sleep. Let me open the instructional up before I go to bed. So this way, as soon as I come down to my computer in the morning, instead of fiddling around on stuff that's not important, I'm immediately going to watch this thing. Whatever you want to do. You just want to make sure that it becomes a routine pattern for you. And again, if there's something else that is not as important, like scrolling social media or something, move that out of the way so you can make room for your study for your jiu-jitsu. So again, these are just ideas of how to make the most of it. I am not giving you the exhaustive list, but I think these are a pretty good start. These are a pretty solid 5 tips for getting the most from it. Again, now you notice I didn't talk about seminars at all, and that's because seminars are a whole nother can of worms. Maybe I'll talk about them for another time, but with instructionals, that would be a good solid 5 tips for you that I think could be really useful to you, Bartek, in your sort of level of training right now. And also, for any of you guys, including Bartek, if you would like to get my Butterfly Guard series, I call it the Butterfly Effect, if you want to get it, and learn how I use Butterfly Guard and do so at a pretty effective level, then just go down below and you can check the links somewhere over there. I have a special page for all of you guys on YouTube where you'll get a discount for it. So if you want to get the series at a discount, just check the links down below and you'll see a little link there, and that'll go to that page and you can get the YouTube discount, which has it for, I think it's close to like maybe 30 or 40% off. So it'll be exclusive to you guys if you want to grab that series. But otherwise, Bartek and anybody else that's wanting to use instructionals and you guys are sort of a little bit more on the newer newer phase. Hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to, again, pick stuff, but also make the most of it, which I think is super, super important when it comes to it. And that's that. So anyway, guys, thanks for the question, Bartek. And I appreciate you guys. Talk to you next time.